So what would be some of the signs and symptoms people might notice about poor vagus nerve function as it relates to digestion?
For sure. Well, a couple things would be things like acid reflux, belching, burping, gas, constipation, diarrhea, bloating. These are all symptoms that we're not digesting our food effectively and we're not producing the proper amount of digestive juices and getting the right muscle movement in the gut. So when I start with it, initially when we eat food, obviously we're producing saliva, and that's kind of the initial part. And of course, we're chewing. And that's the initial part of digestion. And then the food gets down into our stomach. And normally at rest, when we think about the pH of the stomach, at rest between meals, our stomach pH is usually around 3 to 3.5. Now, a neutral pH is 7. So your typical tap water, it's going to be about 7 pH. That's neutral. It's actually very acidic to be in this 3 to 3.5 range. However, to digest food effectively, particularly harder to digest proteins, think about like a steak or something like that. We need to get the stomach acid from that stomach pH environment from 3 to 3.5 down to around 1.5 to 2.2. So that's a big drop, and that's very energy demanding. So it takes a lot of energy in order to produce the stomach acid to get it like that. Now, normally, if we're at rest, our digestive system is healthy, and we're just kind of taking our time eating our food, our body has no problem doing that. However, if we're stressed, if we have poor vagal tone, if we're eating on the go, if we're stressed while we're eating, if we have compromised digestive function because of perhaps infections, toxins, a whole wide range of things. If we've overburdened our system, then we're not going to be able to utilize the energy. We're not going to get the energy into our digestive system to produce that acid. Now, the key with the acid is the acid sterilizes the food. So whenever we eat, we're always going to have bacteria and different microbes coming in. The acid helps to sterilize and kill off a lot of those microbes. And then on top of that, it helps to break down proteins and starts the digestive process of those proteins. And it helps us absorb nutrients like major minerals, iron, magnesium, calcium, zinc. Very critical for that, as well as vitamin B12. It activates when our acid gets real strong the way it should be. We activate a protein called intrinsic factor that helps us digest and absorb vitamin B12. So B12 deficiencies. So whenever you and I are looking at labs and we see somebody who eats meat, eats B12 rich foods, but yet their B12 is low, that tells us, okay, this person's not absorbing B12. And so obviously that's a big factor. That's one of the issues there. So anyways, the acids are helping us absorb these nutrients, and then the partially digested food. So once the acid does its job, partially digests the food, it activates the opening of the pyloric sphincter, which is the little muscle that helps basically keep food in the stomach. Now, as that opens, the food starts to move into the small intestine. The pre-digested food, we call it bolus. So we get this acidic bolus moving from the stomach into the small intestine, where it activates certain receptors because the small intestine needs an alkaline environment. So we have this very acidic bolus. It activates these receptors. And what's going to now alkalize the environment? Well, bile, which is produced by the liver and released by the liver, but also stored in the gallbladder. And when we have, a good amount of food, our gallbladder contracts. And this is, again, vagal nerve activity, right? Vagus nerve is an important component of activating and contracting that gallbladder. So it pushes out the bile to help emulsify fats, right? We know bile helps digest fats, but on top of that, it also alkalizes the proximal part of the small intestine. And so now we create more of an alkaline environment. And then it also triggers the pancreas to produce bicarbonate, which is very alkaline. And that creates this alkaline environment in the small intestine. That is important because we're going to digest and break down certain nutrients more effectively in an alkaline environment in the small intestine. And it also helps to get rid of the acid-loving microbes that survived in the stomach, right? So the stomach acid doesn't kill everything. And we want to sterilize that food And that helps us control what's coming into our system. And if we're not producing the bile and the pancreatic enzymes and the bicarbonate effectively, we can have an overgrowth of certain types of bacteria that shouldn't be overgrown in the small intestine. So again, vagal nerve activity is critical for the production of the bicarbonate as well as the digestive enzymes in the pancreas. And so again, it all starts with that proper stomach acid production, which then triggers the release of the bile and the pancreatic enzymes. So again, the vagus is critical for producing the stomach acid, for triggering the contractile release of the bile, as well as the production of the bile in the liver and the gallbladder, and then the release of digestive enzymes and the bicarbonate from the pancreas so we can actually digest, break down, and absorb the nutrients. And then, of course, it also helps with the muscle contractions in the intestines to help move the food along so it gets through the system where, again, we can break down and digest the food effectively and get the nutrients that we need out of it.